In today's video, let's explore 3 toxic ways your parents may be way too involved in your love life. You may or may not be satisfied with how your parents have raised you, but things move into a whole different level when they have way too much to say about who you're looking for in your romantic life, in your love life. It can cause all kinds of problems and break down a healthy relationship with a child if the parent or parents are overstepping their boundary. Now, there's degrees of toxicity in terms of the energy coming from the parent and how they're trying to mow you over and steamroll you into what they want. The lesser of the two evils is that they're just genuinely concerned perhaps about your welfare, and out of sheer habit, they're just used to doling out the advice. And maybe you as a child and even now as a grown-up are used to going to a parent for certain advice, for certain guidance. So now you're seeking out a little bit of direction or opinions in your love life, but you're sensing an onslaught in their answers. Sometimes who you choose to spend your life with may tie into a parent's belief about how well they parented. So if they don't approve of who you're dating, who you want to get to know in a romantic way, then somehow they failed as a parent. But there's many other reasons. It could be because they're a very unhappy person. Maybe your parents have a horrible marriage. And so there's a lot of meddling going on in what you're trying to do because they're trying to distract themselves from a marriage that they've never worked on. Or another angle is they don't want their child to repeat the same mistakes that they feel they've made. Well, those are their mistakes. That's their life. And trying to control an adult child's behavior by heaping on them their negative reaction to what they went through is something a child is usually going to run away from. I mean, who wants to hear that? You can certainly ask a child, would you like to hear my thoughts about what I went through in my life? Can I let you know what I've learned where I've made some mistakes? That's fine. But to continually smother the child over perhaps months or years about all the things you did wrong, so now you absolutely have to do things a different way, is rarely going to work. In fact, it may make the child want to go that way more than any other way, sometimes out of pure rebellion. Leave me alone. Let me figure out my own way. There's so many times when the parent is just projecting onto their child how they feel about things, what they wanted when they were in their 20s or 30s, what they were attracted to, not understanding that their child may have a completely different viewpoint and things that attract them than what their parents were attracted to. Another reason could be a parent is wanting to dodge the empty nest syndrome. That is a very real thing. It can apply if a parent is single. A single parent has raised her kids. God forbid he or she has to be alone to look inward and figure out their own self and what they're going to do with the rest of their life. That could be terrifying to somebody who's pushed that away. Or, of course, if the parents are married and the relationship is poor. And they found a way to avoid that for years by always focusing on being busy on a hamster wheel. Always focused on the children, running them here, doing this, treating them maybe like they're the spouse. If there's that energy coming from the parent or parents, then when that child is getting ready to leave, that is very threatening to their current status. They're going to be left alone. Now they're going to have to really deal with their husband or wife. Well, they have to have a day of reckoning, let's say. They are going to have to deal with it and figure out themselves, and they can't drag their child into their stuff. So because I jotted so many examples down, I'm going to just refer to my handy dandy legal pad here. And for reason number 1, I wrote trying to set up and somehow direct and control your dating life. They're trying to maneuver it for you. And that can be anything from, did you try her? Did you try him? Did you call them? Did you try to set up a date with them? That's really none of their business. Or your grandmother's not going to like that one. That one that you went out with last week, your grandmother is no way going to like that person. None of their business. Or anything to do with the height. He's only 5'4". Why would you go out with him? Or she's 6'2". Why would you go out with a monster woman? Or here's a good one. Does he or she come from money? Like that somehow is going to add to the quality of the relationship. Sure, having some money around is nice. We need money to live and pay rent and so on. But to make that be a huge priority, whether it's coming from a parent's influence or not, is generally not going to contribute to happiness within the marriage. Next on the list I have, she or he's not of our religion. Why would you go out with somebody who's of a different religion? Or they have different skin color, it's a different race. Are you sure you want to walk into this? Notice how so far nothing is supportive. Nothing is about the positives, what's possibly going to be achieved, the good things. It's all very fear-based, based on the negative. Next up, yeah, they're really overweight. I mean, they're going to have health issues. They're really fat. Or they're too skinny. What do you see in her? She's like a stick. This is the projection part I mentioned earlier, where their opinion is supposed to be your opinion. And it could include, if they start pulling out the big guns, you're going to have ugly children. I don't want grandkids that are going to look like that. She has a huge nose. I don't want kids with a big nose. When they see you're going on more than a few dates, then they'll pull out another big gun. I raised you differently than this. Talk about laying a guilt trip on a child. Next up, after all I've done for you. My goodness, all the ways I've helped you grow up and now you slap me in the face this way. Or another good one is trying to get in there and understand if they went to college or not, what they're going to do for a living. And if going to college is important, that's a big weapon right there. They didn't go to college, or they did go to college, they only went to community college. That is a parent way overstepping what's healthy and appropriate in raising a child. It's not healthy for the child. They need to find their own way in life now that they're an adult. And this kind of energy is toxic. And for reason number 2, which overlaps a little bit with reason number 1 and reason number 3, is they make it all about them somehow. I'm not ready for you to be married. You're way too young. I mean, you're 35 and I thought you'd be at least in your late 30s before you got married. I hope they're paying for the wedding if you're gonna go on and go do this, because we're not. Your father and I are not doing this. And another guilt trip. You don't love me. If you were to do this, you don't really love me. Well, how's a son or daughter supposed to act to that? They're trying to forge their way in life, plot their course, find out what they're all about. They're just starting out. Maybe they're in their early 20s. They need to do this on their own, and having a guilt trip laid on them is not going to help the situation. In fact, hopefully the child will continue to do exactly what they want to do, and the parent may not realize that they're already starting to hurt the relationship down the line, because that son or daughter is going to remember these comments. A kid doesn't forget about these guilt trips. And so this can come back to haunt the parent, and the parent doesn't quite know it just yet. And also, if they do get married, or not married, but they're a couple and they have children, if that parent who's giving all the negative advice wants to have a relationship with their grandchildren, well, there's going to be a lioness at the gate. And the lioness at the gate is the mother of the children. So be very careful when you're treading here, because you may be cutting yourself off from a future relationship with your own grandchildren. And for reason number 3, I wrote down finding reasons to sabotage once you're married or you've moved in together. So once a couple is established, they continue to try to sabotage, make things unpleasant, trying to be a bit cold and unemotional and icy. They call on the phone, the wife answers, and the mother says, "Is your husband home?" Not greeting her in any way. Bit passive aggressive, right? The parents having a family barbecue and letting the son who now married the woman that they didn't want him to marry, and saying to him, she really can't come. There's no room for her. People are going to feel awkward around her. She's of a different religion. So trying to set limits and rules on who the husband or wife can bring in terms of their significant other. Not going to be something that's healthy for a long-term relationship for everybody to get along. Constantly finding ways to put the new spouse down. Also, I wrote putting their own son or daughter down for standing up for the new husband or wife. So if you are married and your parents are doing this to you and putting your spouse down, you have no choice but to choose the primary relationship, which is you and your new spouse. That comes first. That overrides your relationship with your parents if your parents are being a-holes. So it's your responsibility to stand up for your new husband or wife to your parents, and your parents may not like you for that because you're not being the good little boy or the good little girl. Well, if you don't stand up for your new spouse, then you're being a doormat, and your parents will continually try to steamroll you in all kinds of ways. So at some point, you're going to have to draw that line in the sand. Better to do it earlier rather than later. And of course, this ties into trying to make their child choose between the parents or the new spouse. So everything is a situation, even though there doesn't have to be drama, but they're going to make it be drama by trying to make their son or daughter choose. And again, if the marriage is going to work and last, the spouse has no choice but to choose their husband and wife. And if you're not ready to do that, if you're thinking about getting married and you come from a family like this, don't get married because it's only going to get worse. And if you can't stand up for your new husband or wife and let your parents know that this is your primary responsibility now, then your spouse is going to sense all this and it's going to cause a lot of havoc in the marriage, guaranteed. As therapists, we see this in couples counseling a lot. There has to be defined roles in marriages in terms of the husband and wife knowing that they're the primary unit. It makes you feel safe. You're a team. You can take the world on together. You're married. And you need to know that your husband or wife can stand up to the toxic parents. So these are just some random ones I jotted down about a half an hour ago. There's many, many more. Think of your own examples if you come from a family like this. And actually, if you come up with some, leave them in the comment section. I'd love to read them. One thing I did write down for closing is remember, you don't have to tolerate abuse. So if you're in a relationship or in a marriage where you're being abused on some level by the in-laws, you don't have to tolerate it. And then it's time for an ultimatum to your husband or your wife. They need to be the ones to stand up for you, not you. Yes, you can have your own boundaries, of course, but if the husband or wife is not standing up for you, then it's a losing battle. The actual child needs to stand up to toxic parents. So I hope this is helpful to some of you. If you're in a relationship or marriage like this, please leave me some comments below. I'd love to hear any examples you may have. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.